welcome to a special one-hour program on Arun Jaitley's first full budget. In part 2, I shall talk to a combination of India's top industrialists, bankers and financial editors to see how they respond to the specific content of the budget. But first, I have with me three of the country's top politicians to tell us how they view Mr. Jaitley's efforts. They are from the government, the Minister of Environment, Prakash Javadekar; from Congress, former Minister for Commerce and Industry and the Deputy Leader in the Rajya Sabha, Anand Sharma; and from the CPM, its Rajya Sabha Leader and Senior Politburo Member, Sitaram Yechuri. Gentlemen, let's begin with the big picture before we come to specifics and details. Prakash Javadekar, the Finance Minister, began his speech by saying incremental change won't take us anywhere. We need a quantum jump. Tell me, what has he done in this budget that makes for a quantum jump?
Three things. First, devolution to the states. From last year's budget, more than 2 lakh crores have been given in excess of what were given to the states last year. This gives states the flexibility to have their priority worked out and plan according to their needs.
Second,
it's a very big step. Second, the determined action course against black money in the country and stashed away in foreign country is a step forward.
Third,
and third and most important, not following the populist policies but give incentives to the savings, give productive subsidies and make the change in the very content of the budget. Instead of making it popular slogans, make it substantial changes. I think these are the three budgets. This is all about poor, this is all about farmers, this is all about deprived sections, and this is about giving, first time giving social security. The big idea, the jump is universal social security.
Anand Sharma, let me put another view to you. The Finance Minister said, quoting The Economist magazine, this was India's chance to fly. But I noticed that many of the promises in the budget are actually things that he's postponed the delivery on. For instance, corporate tax, the reduction doesn't start till next year and it won't be completed for 4 more. The same is true of ease of doing business. The same is true of rationalization of subsidies, bankruptcy law, contract enforcement, direct tax regime. I put it to you, don't you get the feeling that this budget is a sort of post-dated check?
That's exactly what I have said. It lacks vision. It lacks a roadmap. Even if they have a good intent, it's a missed opportunity. It's a disappointing budget. And let me also add that what Mr. Javadekar was saying, counting as the 3 first, those are laughable. Anybody who has read the Constitution of India and understanding the functioning of the Indian state, Article 280 makes it mandatory that the Finance Commission as constituted, which had to be within 2 years after the promulgation of the Indian Constitution, will make recommendations on the apportionment of the revenues, the taxes, between the centre and the states.
So you're saying to claim credit is wrong.
So what this government is claiming, Karan, that for the first time we are doing it, is shocking. The ignorance. And the deception, because this was the 14th Finance Commission.
Quite right. And they were it was incumbent on them to accept.
Finance Commission before that. No.
Let's not get lost in the details of the Finance Commission.
No, allow me to complete. No. Okay. Let me just complete that. All the previous 13 had made the recommendations. 14th was set up by the UPA government, and the terms of reference were also finalized by the UPA government. They made the recommendations.
Of the recommendations happened under NDA. But Anand Sharma, let's be fair. The acceptance happened under the NDA. Okay, I take your point. I take your point.
Let me. All the 13 previously also.
I take your point. Anand Sharma, let's not get lost in the details of the Finance Commission, because that is an interesting, but it's an additional item. Let's stick to the budget. Sitaram Yechuri, your view of budgets is fundamentally different to that of either Prakash Javadekar or that of Anand Sharma. So let me ask you, as a member of the Communist Party, a somewhat different question. From your standpoint, which is different to theirs, what is the big negative?
Yeah, the big negative as far as I can say it, Karan, is the following. You said that India is ready to fly. I think the Indian poor and the vast majority of our people must be prepared for a crash landing. Now, why do I say this is, this budget, you see, forget all the schemes, etc., that will take some time to implement and all that you have said. But look at the nitty-gritty of the budget. In sum, the budget has decreased direct taxes to the tune of 8,300 odd crores. It has increased indirect taxes to the tune of 23,000 odd crores, close to 24,000. Now anybody will tell you direct taxes are relief for the rich who pay taxes, and indirect taxes are the burden on the vast majority of our people. As a result, what has happened is governmental revenues have fallen. There is a contraction of our economy. Whatever the Finance Commission said, everybody said, everything finally is determined by the total central tax pool collections and the total revenue of the government. The sharing is dependent on that revenue.
Absolutely.
If that revenue itself falls, and it's budgeted to fall,
If I can come in
and if the tax distribution is in favor of the rich,
sure,
then what you're doing is actually widening income and wealth inequalities.
Let me
and
give
you're widening it to an extent.
No, please, a chance to answer that.
It is once again, it is counterproductive for growth. Because you are contracting domestic demand.
Let me give Prakash Javadekar a chance to answer the key point you're making. What he's actually saying, Prakash Javadekar, is something that was said earlier today by Mr. Chidambaram as well, and it's been said by several others during the course of the afternoon, that your budget is pro-rich, anti-poor. It brings corporate tax down over 5 years from 30 to 25%, abolishes wealth tax, and GAAR is deferred. On the other hand, because you're increasing indirect taxes, you're actually ensuring that the poor, who can least afford it, have to pay higher and higher taxes without getting any relief. How do you counter that charge that you're pro-rich and anti-poor?
Now I will use Anand Sharma's term laughable to Chidambaram's argument. Because Anand is in a habit of denigrating his colleagues, like using such adverbs. But I don't do that. The point here is
I am talking to Javadekar.
1 minute.
And he did not make snide remarks.
No, but I am talking about you.
No, please, Mr. Javadekar.
I am talking about you, and you have to listen now.
I am talking about you.
It is pitiable that your understanding of economics is so meager that you don't understand that wealth tax, which was generating 1,000 crore, 1,000 crore has been taken off. No, you know,
Mr.
Chidambaram, I am the one.
Yourself a laughing stock.
Who is the anchor?
I never talked. I
Who is the anchor?
I'll give you a chance to counter Prakash Javadekar in a moment. Let Javadekar Sahab finish, and then I'll come to Mr. Sharma. Go ahead, Mr. Javadekar. Finish.
Please, please. I never talked anything like that.
Because
Mr. Javadekar.
Karan Thapar.
Mr. Javadekar.
Mr. Sharma, why don't we let Mr. Javadekar finish? Then you come back. If you talk one by one, the audience will hear both of you.
Karan, you must correct him.
Well, he has a right. He has a right to make a comment about Mr. Chidambaram.
Right, but he's saying exactly the opposite to what I said.
He used your words to criticize Chidambaram. He didn't say you were criticizing Chidambaram.
No,
he used your language to criticize Chidambaram.
I never criticized Chidambaram.
Gentlemen, he didn't say you did either. Mr. Sharma, we're getting sidetracked by something that's irrelevant.
Can you talk something more substantive?
Can I let Mr. Javadekar answer? Mr. Javadekar, go ahead.
Yes.
Answer the charge that yours is a pro-rich, anti-poor budget.
Wait 1 minute. This is absolutely canard because 1,000 crores of collection of wealth tax is forgone and 10,000 collection by 2% cess is levied. Is it a progressive state or a regressive state? Is it a bonus to the rich or taking away from rich? It's a simple mathematics. In one go he said it, but people want to confuse others. Second, more importantly, why he said 4 years and 5%? Because he said that he wants to give predictable policy and predictable tax regime for all those investing in India, Indians as well as foreign. So,
Mr.
it
Javadekar,
is a
I'm going to interrupt you at that
message
point. One
which
usually
we
gives
need to give.
predictability when you're coming up with adverse decisions. When you're actually giving them a benefit, you don't need to be predictable.
No.
They're very happy to be surprised. They would like and welcome that surprise.
No.
Karan.
No, can I
Mr.
say
Sharma,
something?
I'll come to you in a moment's time. Let Mr. Javadekar
Karan, can
answer.
I?
Mr. Sharma, let Mr.
No, let
Javadekar
me
answer and
complete.
I'll come to you. It's only fair we let him speak.
Yeah, just
Can
1
I?
minute.
Can I?
I'll complete 1 minute. As far as my friend Sitaram is concerned, he says crash landing, but yesterday only Arun Jaitley and Prime Minister made it clear that crash landing happened because of their policies in West Bengal and Kerala for years together. But leave alone that. Contraction.
No, Mr. Javadekar, answer one point at a time. You
what
can't
are you
answer
talking?
everything together and hog the airtime. Anand Sharma,
I am
let's-
telling
No,
let's-
listen.
contraction. He told contraction.
Gentlemen,
And
let's be
contraction
structured.
No,
has
no.
happened
Let me
and
explain one thing.
because of Congress legacy.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Sharma.
No, can
and
I-
please,
can
I'll
I
come to you in a
say
moment's time,
something
Mr.
to you?
Yechuri. Gentlemen, one
No,
at a
first
time.
let me-
Anand Sharma, let's take up that point made by Mr. Chidambaram today when he pointed out at a press conference that in fact in many areas where the poor benefit, in fact the allocation this time in the budget has gone down. Separately in the evening on Doordarshan,
Correct.
Arun Jaitley answered that criticism. He says the reason is very simple. 10% more money is now under the 14th Finance Commission going to the states. Therefore, the quantum of
Good.
money that
Can
the
I
centre had
explain
to
then?
disburse has come down. But the
I have
total amount
heard both.
between the centre and the
I have
states that
both.
will be
I-
disbursed will
Listen.
actually go up because you're forgetting the
Listen.
state share.
Let me
Can I say
answer
something,
that
Karan?
in one sentence.
Karan,
Go
please,
ahead,
please.
answer it.
Something.
See,
One moment, Mr. Yechuri. Let Mr.
Listen.
Sharma speak. Gentlemen, one at a time. Otherwise, none of you can be heard.
yes, if 1,33,000 more have been given because of the Finance Commission recommendations, then 1,10,000 crores have been taken back. That is only as the reduction or the cut in the planned budget. And another 1,33,000 crores have been again taken away. If you look at the budget, if you look at the expenditure budget, the central plan assistance has been cut by almost 4/5 of the amount which is being transferred. And then if you add the two together, then actually more money has been retained by the center than being transferred to the states.
Okay, fine.
Then the cess,
You've made that
each
point.
cess including, no Karan, both, please allow me to complete.
Very quickly,
both
go
the
ahead.
cess, the new cess have been added, and this money collected through the cess, which is a burden on the common man, even on those who don't pay taxes, because it's in addition to the services.
Make the point
tax
quickly, Mr.
increase.
Sharma, because there are others
But
waiting
the
to speak.
cess money goes to the Consolidated Fund of India.
Okay,
not
fine.
even a penny of the cess collection goes
Now,
to the states.
I understand. Now
So
I'm going to
there's
bring in
more collection.
Sitaram Yechuri.
And
Anand
if you
Sharma,
look
I'm
at-
bringing in
and also
Sitaram
what you-
Yechuri because
what
it's
you
only
need to-
fair
I
others
have
get
not
a chance
answered
to
one
speak.
thing, Karan.
No,
One thing is important,
Mr. Sharma.
that the size of the budget is still smaller. If you look at the revenue collection,
Okay.
it's going to be much less.
Well, Mr.
And it's still
Jaitley
on the
disputed
optimistic
that.
and
You're
higher
disputing
side.
Mr.
Can I-
Jaitley's answer. You have a right
That's
to do
not
so.
true. I'm
Sitaram
disputing
Yechuri,
that.
on the other hand, although the image being portrayed by the opposition that this is pro-rich, anti-poor, there's a slew of insurance measures that actually are specifically targeted at the underprivileged and the poor. Accident insurance of 2 lakhs, life insurance of 2 lakhs, senior citizen security fund, the Atal Pension Yojana, and there is at least a theoretical commitment for a universal social security system, although the budget doesn't say when and if it will happen. Now, surely those are first-time ventures for the poor that's never happened before.
No, the point is, the question is of realization. To answer your question that you posed, Mr. Thapar, the question is that of realization. During the last 5 years, how many insurance schemes were announced, and of them only one, that is the health insurance, actually took off. You see, announcements don't mean anything. Please listen to me, that you are talking of center state shares and you're talking of the Finance Commission, etc. But I just repeat in one sentence, all this is determined by the central pool of your tax resources. If your governmental revenue is declining, your tax revenues are declining, then this share will also decline correspondingly.
Well, hang on a
For
second.
heaven's sake,
He
talk about
believes that
facts.
the pickup
No,
in...
talk about economics
he
and facts.
answered that as well.
And not about rhetoric.
Let me point out his answer to you. He said in his interviews that he believes that there's going to be a 15% growth in tax revenues, which will make up for the additional amount he's giving the states. So at the end of that year, he believes that he will have made up what he's giving the states.
Where is that money coming?
Through better economic activity.
Where is that money coming?
Through better economic activity.
From central resources. They are coming from central resources. They are coming from resources collected by the center. When there's a contraction of your economy, where is that money coming from?
But the economy is going to grow, he says, between 8 and 8.4%. It's not contracting. It's going to be growing by between 8 and 8.4%.
Your real governmental expenditures have contracted by 7%. It's not 0.4%, it's contracted by 7%.
I gave you the explanation for that. I'm not going to repeat it. He says that's because, in fact, the share given to the states has gone up by 10% in an unprecedented way. Therefore, if you bear in mind the additional allocation the states will now be making alongside what he's doing in each of these areas, in fact, the total sum is going up.
Can I answer your answer to put it again in a nutshell?
Yes, go ahead, quickly.
There is a shareable amount. That shareable amount is reducing.
All right.
Whatever your percentages may increase within that amount, the total amount is reducing.
Okay, you made that point. Let's leave this as an issue for the audience to judge whether Mr. Jaitley's argument or yours is correct. Let me bring in Mr. Javadekar. I'm moving on. Let's bring in Mr. Javadekar on another issue. And this time, Mr. Javadekar, I'm going to point to something that Mr. Jaitley promised to do last time. That is, rationalize subsidies. In July, when he presented his first budget, he appointed a Bimal Jalan committee. He said that, in fact, in February, he would follow their recommendations. The first report of the Bimal Jalan committee was received some 6 weeks or 2 months ago. And yet, instead of following it and rationalizing subsidies, all he's done is to repeat the commitment to do so and add to it this time a desire to make subsidies better targeted by use of DBT and by use of Jan Dhan Yojana banks and the mobile phone. But the actual reduction in subsidies hasn't happened. So why? Why has he turned his back on a commitment he made in July?
No, he has not gone back on the committee because the central theme again comes from that revenue collection has been less than last year because, or what was expected this year, it is less because this is the legacy we inherit. A complete negative investment cycle and atmosphere results ultimately in this. We have revived the atmosphere, and next year you will see complete buoyancy all over.
And the Bimal Jalan committee made recommendations. We don't know what they are, but they are not being followed or implemented. Why?
1 minute.
You gave a commitment, you hope, now you've forgotten it.
Jaitley ji has given 2 sets. Jaitley ji has given 2 sets. One full commitment and one expected buoyancy, in which case we are committing this additional amount. So he has already provided for that.
No, he's made no commitment about reducing subsidies. His subsidies, with the exception of what's gone on petrol because of the petrol price coming down, is the same.
No expenditure. 1 minute. As far as subsidies is concerned, it is very simple. We want to effectively target it better, deliver it 100%, and make it more effective, productive.
Which is what you promised last year in July. You're repeating the promise again without fulfilling it. You're proving my point. Let me come to the question of ease of business with you, Anand Sharma. That is something that the minister was promising last year. This year, he's made the same promise again. He's only added that there will be an expert committee to prepare a draft legislation to replace multiple permissions with what he calls a regulatory mechanism. But that committee will take several months. The draft legislation will take several months more. Here is a promise being made that won't be delivered on for perhaps a year. And yet, it's something he should have done 9 months earlier. Why aren't you people pointing that out?
Let me tell you, more important is, first, the ease of doing business in India has been an ongoing process and a challenge. And in fact, in the National Manufacturing Policy, which was cleared by the Cabinet in 2011, 25th of October, a single window mechanism for all the manufacturing cities, 16 of which have
clearly
been
it hasn't
notified
worked. You heard
before
Deepak
launch,
Parekh
have been
criticizing
put
the
in place.
government
No,
for
no,
not having
they
done
are
ease of
in the
business.
no.
So let's not
Allow
go back
me
to
to
the past
complete,
to prove that Deepak Parekh is still right.
Allow me to complete, Karan. No, don't cut me in between. The National Investment and Manufacturing Zones under the NMP, that has been done effectively. Second thing, what I was surprised, the Finance Minister saying in his speech that he just launched himself the eBiz platform, portal. Now I would like to, through you, inform the people of this country that the eBiz was conceived in the foreign trade policy announcement of 26th of August.
But you're not answering my question, you're answering a question of your own devising.
Please allow me. No, it's more important than answering you. You must know then, Karan, that it was launched finally, it was executed by the Infosys.
In other words, you did everything Mr. Jaitley is promising to do, and you did it a lot earlier.
Please allow me to complete. The institutional support came from the National Institute of Smart Governance. Pilot projects completed in 2011.
Fine. These details are actually irrelevant because they're part of history. They're not an answer to the question I put to you.
2013, the portal
other than
was
to prove
launched.
that you wanted to do what he's doing.
No, allow me to complete. No, allow me to complete. He said he launched it. I launched it in 2013 in Agra.
All right.
And the Common Delivery Services platform was launched a year ago.
I want to bring you in because I want to put something else to you. You have often in earlier budget debates said to me that the real important thing for the government to do is to put money into the economy to fuel investment, to create jobs, and as a result to put income into people's pockets. I put it to you that the money being put into infrastructure, 70,000 directly more than last year, another 20,000 in the National Investment Infrastructure Fund, and then there are a whole lot of other things like tax-free infrastructure, bonds, corporatization of ports, revisiting PPP. All of that is actually doing what you've been recommending in the past. Do you give Mr. Jaitley credit for what he's doing in terms of infrastructure? Because he's doing what you've been talking about. Sitaram Yechuri? Oh,
you're asking me?
Yes, absolutely, unless you changed your name.
No, the point, Mr. Thapar, is to see that what all he's saying. He said many things 9 months ago, like you correctly pointed out. But what is the actual mechanics through which these are going to be implemented? You have to see them in direct allocation increases, no? Now, in every single sector, from rural development to every single social services sector, you find the allocations have been reduced. So mere rhetoric is not sufficient, Mr. Thapar.
But this is not rhetoric.
What is required
He's
is
actually
a budget.
Increasing expenditure in infrastructure by 70,000 more than last year, another 20,000, possibly 25 into the National Investment Infrastructure Fund. It's not rhetoric. This is real money.
No, tell me in your budget documents under which head has it come? No, which head has it come?
It comes under roads, it
this
comes under railways.
This has just been a declaration. No. On the roads, on the contrary, on the ports, you said corporatization.
Let me then give Mr. Javadekar the last word to answer that. What you're saying, Sitaram Yechuri, is that, Mr. Javadekar, what Mr. Yechuri is saying is this is rhetoric. You haven't backed it up with actual provision in the statistics and the details. Has Mr. Jaitley made a commitment without backing it up? A quick answer.
No. Yes, Jaitley has done it by balancing the growth needs and fiscal discipline. So he has lengthened the fiscal discipline target of 3% up to 3 years, but he has provided 40,000 immediately as a public investment in road, so that the public investment starts and then private investment also picks up.
Have you read the budget, Mr. Javadekar?
Now there are tenders.
Please read the expenditure budget.
Coming for tenders. This is what is happening.
All right,
we have not read the budget. When you are asking a minister who has not read the expenditure budget.
Why you are speaking?
I'm sorry.
Has Mr. Jaitley actually backed up his commitment or his claim to put in 70,000 into infrastructure more than last year with actual allocations? Is it just rhetoric or is it based with actual money? We're going to have to end this particular discussion there. I'm going to apologize for the audience for the fact that we had the three politicians often quarreling with each other and talking over each other rather than making their own points. But that, I suppose, is inevitable when you have three opposition politicians and a government politicians together on budget day. They're never going to agree. Time for a break, but then I'll be joined by some of India's top industrialists, bankers and financial editors to discuss their response to the specific content of the budget. And this time, I'm confident we will not have guests who are quarreling. Welcome back to this special episode on Budget 2015. I'm now joined by the Chairman of Maruti, R.C. Bhargav, the President of CII and Chairman of DCM Shriram Limited, Ajay Shriram, the Chairman of Expro India and Digjam Limited, Siddharth Birla, the India Chairman of HSBC Bank, Naina Lal Kidwai, and the Chairman of the Business Standard, T.N. Nainan. Mr. Nainan, let me start with you. The Finance Minister has decided, in fact, that the fiscal deficit target for next year will not be the 3.6 laid down by the FRBM target guidelines, but 3.9. And the final target of 3.0 has been postponed by a year to 17-18, 1 year later than it's meant to be. In the circumstances that he faces in the country, was he wise to do this? Or does he now run the risk of an adverse response from the rating agencies and possibly a threatened downgrade?
Karan, I think we must recognize that there are always trade-offs to whatever you do. The Finance Minister has chosen to fund public investment and therefore kept the deficit higher than 3.6, which is fine. But you must recognize that in the process, you postpone the reduction of interest rates because the government's borrowing program gets bigger, therefore interest rates stay higher, and that comes in the way of private investment. And private investment is much the bigger part of the total investment cake in the country.
So has he done the wrong thing?
No, I'm not saying it's wrong. The argument has been that private sector is not investing, therefore government is investing. This is the argument.
Now he's making it more difficult for private sector to invest.
No, so yeah, so you know, there are costs and benefits, and there is a trade-off, and one must be aware of that trade-off.
Picking up on the point that you've just heard, Ajay Shriram, what the Finance Minister has done is to put an awful lot of money, at least theoretically on paper, into infrastructure. 70,000 crore to be spent additionally this year by the government itself, another 20,000 possibly going up by 5,000 more in the National Investment Infrastructure Fund. Then there's tax-free infrastructure bonds. The whole PPP system is to be revisited with the sovereign bearing the major part of the risk, corporatization of minor ports, 5 mega projects in the power sector. As President of CII, do you believe this is a significant boost to infrastructure that was something you were wanting and calling for, and that he's actually done what you wanted?
Absolutely. I think the focus which the Finance Minister has given on infrastructure and looking at ways of raising funds, for instance, like you mentioned, you know, putting aside funds from the government is a direction everyone does. But I think looking at some bonds, investment bonds, utilizing gold, monetizing that, raising funds on that account, I think these are things which are out of the box. These are things which are, you know, not in the normal course of business. And I think the other side which is positive is looking at public sector, looking at investments in a big way and working towards creating a solid base and foundation for achieving the Make in India plan, which is the major thrust and drive of the government. So I think it's an inclusive budget, forward-looking budget, corporates and for the common man. I think it's for both.
When you were last with me, Mr. Bhargav, one of the things that you stressed on, and you said this with specific reference to the things that need to be done to improve the manufacturing environment of this country, was ease of business.
Sure.
Now, what the Finance Minister has done is to appoint an expert committee to prepare a draft legislation to replace multiple permissions with a regulatory mechanism.
Sure.
And there are one or two small things about making it easier to handle excise and service taxes. The problem is, this committee will take several months to report. That draft legislation could take several months more to pass. The end result may not be reached for another 9 months or even a year. And yet this is something he could have thought of and done 9 months earlier. He didn't have to go through the last 9 months to do this. So is this a case of something that's being done 9 months too late and is going to take 9 months more to happen?
Yeah, but at least hopefully it'll get done, because till now nobody had ever thought on the lines of getting guys to do the job according to guidelines and rules, and then only hauling them up if somebody is actually violating those.
So this is a good thing, and you forgive him for the fact that he's thought of it a bit late.
I think it takes bureaucracy also to come up with these ideas. It takes a little time for it all to be accepted, that we'll do it like this, because there'll be lots of objections and
Except
dangers
ease
and
of
risks.
business was something he was aware of and spoke about when he was leader of the opposition in the Rajya Sabha. Could he not have devised this proposal in July?
You know, originally about all the talk we had heard till now, Karan, was about single window clearances, reducing a lot of laws, making it simple to get clearances. This is the first time I've heard this kind of proposal, that you will start business according to guidelines and then we'll haul you up only if you violate them.
Now, something, Mr. Birla, that the finance minister has done, which has been very warmly received by industry, is the decision, or the announcement at any rate, that corporate tax will come down from the present 30% to 25%, but it won't start happening till next year, and it will take 4 years before it's actually completed. And when asked, he said the reason it was happening in this slow, staggered way is he didn't want to take industry by surprise. But I put it to you, this is the sort of surprise industry likes. They don't have to be forewarned about it. So do you think he should have done it immediately rather than stagger it?
No, Karan, I think the euphoria over the reduction in corporate tax is overdone. And that is why it's causing people to say that this is the pro-corporate budget, when it is really an equitable budget to all constituencies. You see, he anchored first by saying that the effective tax that is paid by the Indian corporate sector is about 23% if one takes into account the exemptions. And therefore, and the second benchmark that he used was global rates to align our policies globally. And therefore, he picked this number of 25%, which is well in consonance with what's happening in the world. And at the same time, he will bring the tax down and reduce the exemptions.
But my
So
question
really
is,
speaking,
can I interrupt?
at-
My question, Mr. Birla, is not why he picked 25%, but really my question is, why is he taking 4 years to reach it? Why not do it immediately and give that incentive to industry now? His answer to that was, he didn't want industry to be taken by surprise. And I put it to you, this is the sort of surprise people like and welcome.
Yes, I would agree with you. I would agree with you, but certainly if he's going to very scientifically do away with the exemptions, he might need more time. I mean, we'll all be pleasantly surprised if he does it in 2 years instead of the 4 that he has indicated today. But certainly he's not going to start tomorrow morning, and I think let him start getting his GST revenues at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year. So once the finances on the revenue side are robust for the government, that's the time when they should start tinkering with the direct taxes for the corporate sector.
You wanted to come in?
I don't think he could afford to cut corporate taxes by 5% straight away and still meet his fiscal deficit targets and all his other expenditures. So the surprise part, I think, related, what I understood, was to the withdrawal of exemptions. He didn't want the companies to be taken by surprise that suddenly some exemptions which they had planned for just disappeared without any notice.
Except that they wouldn't have minded so much because they'd have got the 5%
cut,
reduction.
but 5% cut is not feasible.
Taking this point that I'm making and looking at how often it's been repeated in the budget, you get the feeling that much of this budget is like, how should I put it, a post-dated check. After all, corporate tax, it's not going to happen for 4 years more. Ease of doing business, not until that committee gives its report and then the legislation happens, and that could take a year. Rationalization of subsidies, he promised it last year. The Bimal Jalan committee has given its interim report. He promised he would act on it. He hasn't. All he's done is to repeat his promise to rationalize subsidies. So once again, he's just making a promise, repeating an earlier promise. And that's also true of bankruptcy law. It's true of contract enforcement. It's true of the direct tax regime. Do you get the feeling that a lot of the promise is actually a post-dated check for delivery sometime in the future?
A lot of it is exactly that, and in the case of the legislation in particular, we don't quite know whether it will go through, because there is a whole problem of the Rajya Sabha and what it might do. So we don't know if the legislation will actually pass or whether it will get blocked. I do think that certainly on what you were discussing before, which is the cut in corporate tax rates, I don't see what the problem was in starting the process this year instead of waiting till next year. You can do it over 4 or 5 years, it makes sense. Because,
But start now.
But start now because companies have to make adjustments, and I think you could have started this year.
Nena, something that's attracted a lot of attention in the media is the announcement that he will come up with a comprehensive new law to tackle what he calls the problem of black money, with rigorous imprisonment for concealment, rigorous imprisonment for non-filing of taxes. Do you get the feeling that this could verge into a new form of tax terrorism, harassment and terror by the back door, or do you welcome it?
I think, Karan, it's time that we tackle this whole issue of black money, in that it has sat out there outside the system, in India, offshore, and we really do want it in the economy. So anything that brings it back in is good, and nothing we do is enough, because there's so much to do in this space. So it's a great move. I thought you were going to actually ask me about the fiscal deficit, given that we had a conversation where there were
But we discussed it before you joined us. I didn't ask you because you were late joining us, and I've already discussed that issue with Naina, and I don't want to go back to it because the audience will be bored. So that's why I'm asking you a different question. Had you been on time, I would have asked you that.
Yeah. Great. Well, let me just tell you that I'm delighted that the fisc is where it is at the 3.9, as you can well believe.
Okay. Let me bring in Ajay Sriram. And Ajay Sriram, let me put that same point about black money to you. As president of CII, you must have noticed that many of your colleagues at the Confederation have actually expressed concern. They fear that this could lead to some form of harassment. They fear that this could lead to some form of tax terrorism by the back door. They fear the return of FERA by another name. Do you share those concerns, or is it impolitic of you to say so in public?
No, I'm not aware of anyone being apprehensive of this law. We've talked about it. We genuinely feel it is a very desirable direction. It is something which anyone who has illegal money outside must come back to the country. There's no two ways on that. My understanding, when I heard the FM a little earlier, is that they're waiting for the new law to be formed and formulated. Once that is done, then they will take action on the penal direction of 300% tax plus jail term, etc., which is a good direction to take to clean up the system. I understand they want to have some sort of a window before that and give an opportunity for people to come clean.
You mean
and
a
after
VDIS,
that they want to take penal action.
a voluntary disclosure
I think
scheme.
it's a direction. I don't know what form it's going to take, but I think moving in the direction of getting black money from outside India into India is a very desirable direction.
Let's come, Mr. Nainan, to two things that intrigued me about the budget, because they raise possibilities which he hasn't spelled out at all. The first is this comprehensive bankruptcy law. Does it amount to some sort of exit policy without saying so? Does it have some sort of possibility of labor law reform like Rajasthan's done attached to it, which he hasn't talked about? What does it amount to if it doesn't have those two?
Karan, I think you have to recognize that banks find it difficult to enforce getting their money back. There are laws like Sarfezi, but the fact is that a lot of bank loans are now stuck, and you can't really get your way out of that. So a proper bankruptcy law would make it easier for you to get your money back by forcing bankruptcy on a company if it can't pay.
But will it also then give that permission to companies to exit out of ventures that are loss-making?
Well, if it's bankrupt, I don't want to take names, but we all know the names of companies that have huge debts piled up. They're in no position to repay. The banks can't get back their money, and yet they somehow manage to keep functioning in some form or the other. You have to have a proper bankruptcy law, quick, effective action to cut the...
As a chairman of a major manufacturing company, how do you read the bankruptcy law? Do you think it has somewhere in it a hint of an exit policy?
Possibly, but you know, the existing law, the BIFR, has been so misused by people not to repay money to anybody by just making an application to the BIFR and then gets stuck there for years and years and years. I think what he's talking about is a law very similar to what is in other Western countries about restructuring companies which have gone bankrupt. If somebody is going to restructure it, the owner loses the asset, loses whatever value he thinks he can get out of it, only gets a little bit of it. I think that's the right thing to do.
Now, Mr. Birla, something else that intrigues me is the very high figure in the budget for disinvestment. It's, I believe, 69,000 crore, considerably higher than any finance minister has been able to achieve in any of the years up till now. And in interviews, Mr. Jayant Sinha, the Minister of State, has indicated that he's not ruling out strategic sales of loss-making companies. How do you respond to both that figure of 69,000 as well as the possibility of strategic sale of loss-making PSUs?
Well, 69,000, obviously they must have done their arithmetic, and it is a function of the market and the valuations that you can get. So let us take that figure at face value. And in today's market, which has really run up over the last 2 or 3 years, or particularly over the last 2 years, these valuations are possible. On the strategic sale of loss-making units, I think it's a very welcome step, because you know, in these various discussions, and maybe media also carried some discussions, we don't want to take a company to such a level that it doesn't have any buyers or no economic value in rejuvenating it anymore. So one has to find a point of time at which it can still be rejuvenated and still yield value for the nation, whether by coming into government coffers, or whether by protecting jobs, whether by this thing. So I think it's a welcome step if they take a strategic sale of loss-making units.
You want to come in on this point?
Karan, I just want to say that the budget documents have a specific provision of 28,000 odd crores for strategic disinvestment. It's separate from the rest of the disinvestment program.
So this is on top of the 69,000?
No, on top of 41,000 or so. There is a 28,000 which is specifically said will be strategic disinvestment. So there is an absolute figure mentioned for strategic disinvestment.
And I don't believe it means strategic disinvestment of loss-making units.
Yeah, not
as far as I know,
although that's what Jayant Sinha in the interview
no,
to
but
Doordarshan said.
what the finance minister said was loss-making PSUs will be sold, as well as strategic sale of some PSUs.
This is therefore a pretty new novel step, because these could accrue profitable
What it means by that is not very clear, but it's a very different kettle of fish from what they've been saying till now.
Naira Lal Kudai, something that was in the budget which hasn't been remarked upon so far in the discussions that I've heard is two things to do with financial management. A public debt management agency is to be created, and the RBI Act is to be amended to create a monetary policy committee. As a lead banker, do you welcome those two measures?
I think anything which creates a system by which there's congruence of action between government and the Reserve Bank of India is good. In fact, this public debt office is something which has been discussed before, and particularly in the context of where you get a fisc which goes up, it's very important to see that government borrowing in fact stays flat, which is the expectation, and that the efficiency of this borrowing needs to absolutely be improved. Otherwise, what we had was a system by which Reserve Bank of India was very much the caretaker of this process, and I think in some cases would have been conflicted therein. So this reordering of the system is good, and I think a step in the right direction.
You were a bit worried earlier on that the increased fisc of 3.9 as opposed to 3.6 could crowd out private investment. Do you think the creation of a public debt management agency will lower the chances of that happening?
No. I'm not worried necessarily by 3.9%. I merely said that whether you lower the deficit or lower it less has a trade-off. That my only point was that don't look at it in isolation.
Absolutely, but do you think this will minimize the crowding?
But the public debt office has been on the cards for some time. It's part of a much broader range of financial sector reforms that the finance minister has announced. There are about 6 or 8 things he's announced. It's all in his budget speech. So he's moving sort of across a broad platform on financial sector regulatory reform and governance.
Ajay Shriram, something that many people feel he didn't spend a lot of time on is agriculture. I noticed that he's put down in his budget an 8.5 lakh crore credit for farmers, and there's also some 5,300 crore for micro irrigation. But given that pretty close to 65–66% of India's population derive their livelihood one way or another from agriculture, do you think agriculture has been slightly neglected, or is that an unfair comment? And I know I'm asking the President of CII.
Because he has looked at agriculture. No, I appreciate. But I'll put it this way. I think if you look at it, he's talked about a national unified market for selling products. I think that is something really required, because today when farmers have to sell their produce through mandis, they lose between 10 to 15% of realization because of the various taxes at the mandis, etc. So I think that is one. Secondly, he has put aside an allocated amount of money for irrigation, which is again very much required. He has put aside 25,000 crores for rural infrastructure development, which is a very major sum, which actually will help agriculture build the network of roads, etc. So I think agriculture has not really been neglected. Okay. Agriculture is a state subject basically. So I think there's a lot of coordination needed between the center and the states. But I think this allocation of funds and focus towards increasing agricultural remuneration to the farmers and easing their business. And the second I'd like to say is that he's talked about this issue of JAM, of using the Jan Dhan Yojana, using the Aadhaar and using the mobile technology. I think that also will help in terms of making the facilities for rural India much more productive, much better, price discovery. I think all these things will happen, which will actually help the farmer.
JAM leads me back, and I'm happy he brought it up. Sorry, what did you say? Go ahead, Naina, go ahead.
I just wanted to come in on this one and really support what Ajay said, in that we cannot ignore the focus on through Swachh Bharat on what is largely an agenda for rural India, but really looking at prevention and health. What we do is we save maybe 60% of the budget of people who live below the poverty line, which otherwise goes into medical care. So bringing in the whole area of health and prevention is a very critical aspect of ensuring the betterment of the people. So we should not ignore these large big vision areas as well, which benefit everyone in the country, but particularly those that live below the poverty line.
I want to come back to subsidies, because in a sense that point that was made by Ajay about JM is an area where in fact he hopes to be able to target subsidies better alongside rationalizing them. But are you disappointed that this was something he committed himself to do 9 months ago? He's got the first interim report in, he hasn't acted on it, he might even very soon be getting the final Bimal Jalan report, and there's no real commitment to reduce subsidies except for what the oil price decline has automatically done for him.
That's not completely true. The fact is that they've deregulated diesel, and that was a 40,000 crore subsidy. It's gone.
But 6 months ago nearly.
No, but they moved on cooking gas to the direct benefit transfer cash payment scheme, which I say there were a lot of money because there was a huge diversion of cooking gas. So that is correctional subsidy bill. You have to now see what they will do, and he's announced in his budget that the cooking gas thing will now be expanded into other things. Today, you still don't have 100% coverage of Aadhaar. So you need to get that done. And then you can move. I would think that within the next 1 year, they will be in a position, because now they've got universal banking coverage, they need universal Aadhaar, you've got more or less universal mobile, then they'll be in a position to take the next step.
So you're not really unhappy or disappointed that
no, I think their agenda is very clear, they've spelled it out, they've said so, and they will do it.
How much of this budget depends upon the problem that so many other budgets in the past have floundered over, delivery? The promise is there on paper. How worried are you that delivery may not happen?
See, the delivery mechanism, Karan, as I've said earlier also in India, over the years has become very weak. And few government programs that I know of have ever met with the kind of ground reality as was promised in the policy or the project. The mechanism for delivery is still the same. And therefore, I think the biggest challenge which this government has in lots of these programs, how to execute them so that the actual benefits go down to the intended beneficiaries at the ground level with the same machinery we have. The only evidence that it could happen is the Jan Dhan Yojana, where they actually succeeded in implementing what they said they would.
Very quickly, when I ask this question, Mr. Birla, give me a quick answer because then I'll end the show. Do you share that concern about delivery, or do you think that delivery is something this government will be extremely conscious of and perhaps better able to perform on?
I think they are very conscious of it. Ultimately, they will have to deliver through the system that exists. They will require a lot of building bridges with all the states to make sure that everything is delivered down on the ground. But I think with the kind of, if I may use the word, management attention that is being given to implementation, I think we will see some robust structures evolve.
All right.
And therefore, my concern there is limited.
All right, my thanks to all my guests for joining me. My apologies to Naina Lal Kidwai that we weren't able to patch her up earlier. I believe we had a little bit of an audio and visual problem. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.